Okay, Method Man's 2004 song Never Hold Back includes the lyric, "Catch me in the West Wing, I might rob low." Wait, one more. Hamilton was heavily influenced by the West Wing. In the Schuyler Sisters, the "I'm looking for a mind at work" is a reference to Sam Seaborn telling Ainsley Hayes, "Before I look for anything, I look for a mind at work." And then in That Would Be... I'm ruining every song for everyone right now. In That Would Be Enough, Eliza sings, "Long as you come home at the end of the day, that would be enough." And that was from Bartlett says to his daughter Ellie, "The only thing that you need to do is come home at the end of the day. That would be enough."
Hey.
Or wait, no, he just says at the end of the day. So anyway.
Hey. Why do they only eat one egg for breakfast in France?
It would be enough.
That's right.
A swing,
Rob
blows in the show, Stalker Channing, then Dooley Hill, and then Allison Janney, and then Anna Maloney, Richard Schiff, John Spencer, and also Bradley Whitford, and with Martin Sheen, the West Wing.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got it.
I've earned everything I've got. Yeah, good.
Mr. Gorbachev.
You didn't build that.
Mr.
Yeah, good.
Tear down this wall.
What's your favorite president?
Tear down this wall.
I can see Russia from my house. Pokemon go to the polls.
Ask not
Yeah, good.
what your country. He did say well alive.
I'm recording. Hello!
Hey, everybody!
Welcome back to a chicken that's inside every pod.
Inside every heart,
Every one of our hearts has a chicken in the pod.
for all you Americans.
It's been a little bit.
It's banned.
Yeah, it's banned because we've been, like everybody else, following the election very closely. Before we get into our topic today, I feel like we should do a Trump watch. Is he alive?
Trump watch.
He's alive. He's
alive.
He's alive. He is trying to become the president again. I wanted to bring this up just because it's going on in the news. It's what's happening. It's part of the chaos the last couple of weeks we've all been experiencing. But the truth is, it doesn't matter. Joe Biden's going to be the president. I mean, it's not great of Trump to be setting up a pathway for potentially a more competent dictator in the future to take advantage of. He's setting precedent for maybe somebody worse, and I am, as you know, and as many of our listeners might know, I'm a very staunch civil libertarian.
Wait, how is he setting up for...
First of all, just by and all normalizing the idea that you can just say no and not allow the transition to go on, which is what he's doing. He's not allowing the transition to happen. Traditionally, what happens when there's a change of administration is representatives of the incoming administration and representatives of the outgoing administration spend this intervening couple of months making sure that the administrations can transition all of their information and all their power effectively.
And, in the case of maybe a global pandemic, they might help some of the people, too.
There's an argument that has been made that the intelligence failures that led to 9/11 were possibly, at least in part, due to the shortened transition time between Clinton and Bush.
Because of the
recount. Which basically made it so there was no winner for a long time and the transition was very short. So it's definitely a matter of national security and safety to make sure that Biden can be getting security briefings, national security briefings. He should be getting briefings right now. They should be able to be doing federal Justice Department background checks of their appointees.
Yeah.
All this stuff they can't do because Trump's just not signing off on it.
So when you said you're a civil libertarian, can you clarify that for listeners?
Yeah, what I mean is that civil liberties, as defined classically by ACLU or the early liberals of the 18th century, which is to say your ability to be free in a society, talk about freedom of speech, talk about freedom of religion, talk about freedom of protest.
So you weren't saying, I'm a libertarian.
I'm not saying that.
Okay, just for the listeners.
Yeah. I'm saying that, like the American Civil Liberties Union, I am a strong believer in personal freedoms and civil liberties, and having governments that are willing to throw out the rule of law in the interest of keeping power is a grave threat to civil liberty everywhere.
Yes. Another thing that's been going on is good news. There have been 2 vaccines that have been said to be pretty promising.
From Pfizer and Moderna.
Yeah, they were sort of dropped basically right after Biden's win.
Yeah.
Which, I do feel like if they were announced beforehand, that really could have worked in Trump's favor, because it would have shown to any of the people that were undecided, it would have been like, oh, well, this is what he's been saying.
Trump certainly
and it's
thinks
true.
that, yeah.
That's what Trump thinks. I do think there's a degree of, I do think he would have performed better, not necessarily have won, but performed better.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that is, so he's very pissed about that, and I do think it does show a slant. Like, I do think that they, were sitting on that for a little bit. But still, it's all still ongoing, but very promising. My close friend, who's a chemist, and her husband's also been following and is a scientist and has been studying everything. They both feel very positively about these vaccines.
Yeah. And
they are quite skeptical. So that's really exciting, and I think we all just have to keep up what we're doing and being as vigilant as possible and finding alternative ways to celebrate and communicate with our loved ones that doesn't involve putting each other at risk of spreading. So
yeah, well, now is the most important time to be doing that, because we might have a vaccine coming soon. I mean, Pfizer's vaccine, just maybe yesterday, they said that in the second trial, its effectiveness had gone up. It was 95% effective, and they're fast tracking it with the FDA. So we might have a vaccine as early as first quarter of next year, which means it's more important than ever to make sure we're not spreading this thing, to make sure that we're all being very, very safe. And you know what? That includes California Governor Gavin Newsom, you fuck.
Yeah,
This guy, let me just talk about Newsom for a second.
Yeah.
This guy, Gavin Newsom, was photographed, I think it was a week or two ago that it happened, having a big fancy dinner at the French Laundry, which is Thomas Keller's restaurant, I believe it's somewhere in the wine country. I've always wanted to go, but he gets to go. And it's one of the best restaurants in the country.
Just let it out, Kyle.
I'm
Embrace
mad.
your inner
I'm
Rush
mad.
Limbaugh.
I'm mad about this. These fat cats, these fat cat phony libs in Sacramento.
Yeah, and Gavin Newsom, he was actually with members of the medical
like top
elite.
medical advisors.
They're
and things.
all hobnobbing.
They're hobnobbing.
They're
indoors.
They're hobnobbing and knob lopping. What's the word for sucking dick? They're hobnobbing
and knob slobbing.
Thank you.
They're hobnobbing and they're knob slobbing
without masks.
Yeah.
Indoors, like they're trying to say it was an outdoor thing, but it's like they're in some fucking glass.
And here's the thing. This is fucking hard. This year's been really hard. It's hard to stay indoors in your house all the time. It's hard to not have a lot of money.
It's hard.
We're all fucking having a hard time. All right?
It's hard. Yeah.
These, for lack of a better term, elites, basically...
Lizard people,
basically showing that the rules don't apply to them.
Mm-hmm. And we've seen this with Republicans, and yet we've seen this with Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah. It's making it worse. It's making it worse because it's making the people that are already struggling, already don't want to think it's a big deal, and just want to go back to their lives, it's giving them license to do that.
Yeah.
Because they see, if the governor doesn't have to wear a mask, if the governor can go to a restaurant with his friends and laugh and talk and not wear a mask, why can't I? And they're right about that, because the governor shouldn't do that either. Nobody should be doing that.
Yeah,
That's
it makes
insane.
it it makes it feel like, okay, do all these people, all these rich white elites have some, cure-all that they are not sharing with us? And we know that, Trump and Christie and all these people that were medically very at risk, that they made it out with their experimental treatments that we're not allowed to get. And
we need to be staying at home, but the government needs to be making it easier.
Well,
they cut us a $1,200 check a couple months ago, and that's it.
Yeah, I saw a really good tweet that was saying how much money that's basically been that we've received from this pandemic. I'll pull it up. But what's so hypocritical as well is Newsom and Mayor of LA Garcetti.
Retire, bitch.
Well, both of them should retire, bitch.
Agreed.
Their whole thing is these guilty. They're this guilty, don't have your barbecue. I know you want to. I know you really want to hang out at a restaurant.
I know you want to hug your mom.
But then they're also and these are all their tweets. They're also it's but also, it's time for the restaurants to open up. It's time for blah. Yeah. And then, Newsom or Garcetti, they were like, Halloween's canceled. And they're like, Halloween's not canceled. And it's like, this is so fucked up. And the whole way we've been discussing Thanksgiving is messed up because it's like, we always, there's been, some scientist that's written really good articles about how the mainstream media is putting all the focus on people that do outdoor things like hiking, going to the beach, etc., posting, manipulative photos that make it look like everyone's really close at the beach and touching, all these things and saying that these are the super spreader events. And same with the protests, demonizing safe protesters wearing masks, saying this is the main cause and blaming them when the really high rates are coming from people in food plants and factories and fast food places. Well, Walmart doesn't have to offer its people any, paid leave or hazard pay because they're just blaming us. And so that's what these, Newsom and Garcetti and people in Portland, Ted Wheeler, without, offering any thing to incentivize us to stay home at all. And then them just going out and doing the exact same thing. And it's with something like Halloween, they banned Halloween activities and then immediately walked it back when it's trick-or-treating is actually one of the more safe things you can do. And it made a lot of people feel conflicted about their community and
no sense of
pitting
scale.
people against each other.
There's no sense of scale. There's no sense of context. They're banning you from doing things that are relatively safe in order to keep open businesses that are not.
Yeah,
and that's
exactly.
absurd. And
you won't get mad at Walmart or Target or any of these places for being open.
Exactly like climate change, because the top polluters are a handful of companies that create awful greenhouse emissions. But we're all told that we have to recycle and buy certain light bulbs and we'll solve climate change.
Exactly.
That's not how it works. You can't solve systemic problems on an individual level. And here's the thing, too. I want to get that tweet in just a second, but I just want to say, I can come on here. And Lucia can come on here.
Ew.
And Penny can come on here.
Stop. That's our little baby girl. She's asleep right now.
No, she's got one eye open.
Oh, wow. Just like I do.
Always.
On Newsom.
That's right. I can come onto this show, and I can say, wear a mask. Wear a mask. Socially distance yourself. I can say that. You know why? That's all I can do. All I can do is give you advice, and that's my advice. The governor of California, the Congress of the United States of America, they can do a hell of a lot more than just tell you to wear a mask.
Tell them, honey.
You should wear a mask. But every time Gavin Newsom or your state governor tweets, wear a mask, get into his mentions and say, write me a check. Yeah. You know what? You want me to stay home? I'll do it. You actually have power, though. And you can do something better than tell me to do the thing I've been doing for 9 months. Help us out.
Exactly.
Give us some money.
And it's this is so, I'm in a position, you are in a position, it's still tenuous, but we're still in positions where we are able to social distance and stay at home.
We're very lucky.
We're very lucky. And they, there are so many people who are living alone or who are, at risk of being kicked out of their houses. And by making the narrative be cancel Thanksgiving, cancel Christmas, cancel whatever, and you are incredibly selfish if you want to see your family, yada, yada. Obviously, I agree that we need to be doing everything that the CDC and whatever is telling us to do. Even though they're probably lizard people also. Except it's like, hey, what about encouraging, like, please don't travel to see family, please stay at home, but also, it's not on the cover of Martha Stewart magazine, like, how to have the best picnic with your family, or how to...
It's all backwards.
It's like, there are people that are going to die because they felt like, you can't take away my God-loving Thanksgiving and my turkey, and there's people that are gonna kill themselves because they are alone, and it's like... There are safe ways, like, what about, promoting Thanksgiving trick-or-treating? Like, ring the doorbell and visit your family and talk on your porch or hang out in your backyard. And, like, there's no respect for that Americans have to, go throughout their lives and their days when we know the rich elites, basically nothing is disrupted for them.
That's exactly the thing. We live in this stratified society. And there's a bunch of people that are making bad decisions right now. Yeah. I will, like, normal people, right? Mm-hmm. People that should be wearing masks.
People we love.
People we love. But here's the thing. If you look at something like that's happening right now with COVID, where the government and all these fucking billionaires are obviously not doing a goddamn thing about it, and your response is to blame the average people that are making bad decisions and not the people that could actually change their situation that are refusing to do it, you're listening to the wrong show. We don't blame average people here. This is a pro-average people podcast. And when average people do bad things, we'll call it out. And we'll say, use better judgment, you fucking idiot. But at the end of the day, these are social problems. These are structural issues. And the people that actually wield direct material power need to be the one that we hold accountable for these failures.
Yes.
You can't just say, these dumb hillbillies in Arkansas refuse to stay home, and that's why all these red states have these things. No, they have been failed by their government too. Yeah. We've all been failed by our government.
Failed by our government, failed by our science classes.
Yes, absolutely.
And, like, even if a lot of these people, just like, I'm sure a lot of us talking to our friends and family realize how science illiterate a lot of us are.
Unbelievable.
Because it doesn't really affect our day-to-day life usually. Yeah. But it's like, at the beginning of this, I almost said campaign, at the beginning of this pandemic, simple, concise messaging could have given people enough of the framework and understanding for basic germ theory. Yeah. And instead, one of our biggest flops in this rollout was this confusion about the masks, saying that the masks don't actually work, that they will... If you have it, you should wear a mask. If you don't have it, don't worry about wearing a mask. Was it that or the other way around?
There's all kinds of shit.
And it's just like, hey, why don't we all just wear a mask for now to prevent it? Or like, why don't we all, whatever.
People are confused because this got confusing.
When we don't know everything. We have not known everything about this virus. And which is why it's felt like it's the Venom symbiote, and it's like, or it's They Live. It's been like, well, I don't get, how does it spread?
It's the Rage virus from 28 Days Later.
Yeah, but every single scientist has known enough about viruses in general to know, wash your hands, stay away from other people if you're sick or they might be sick, and wear a mask. Like, that from the beginning should not have been controversial. Everyone could have agreed on that.
And the reason why
it became more politicized and more polarized.
And the reason why it's politicized, the reason why it's a partisan issue, isn't because a bunch of normal people decided to make it that. It's because the President of the United States made it a political issue, made it a partisan issue.
Made it a race issue.
Absolutely.
Asians wear masks and they're weak. We can't wear masks. We can't have the China flu.
Did this. So basically, have some sympathy for the brotherhood of man. Have some empathy for your countrymen that are all dealing with this. Reserve your anger for the people that deserve it, which is anybody with a $5 million or more home.
Exactly. So there was, speaking of great tweets, there was a tweet from Bugmain that was
I love Bugmain.
So good. That was like referencing the movie Interstellar, which involves Matthew McConaughey
He travels through time.
Travels through time. Yeah. He's stuck in, I don't know, on another planet or something. He's trying to communicate through gobbledygook.
He communicates through, he reaches through time to knock over books off a shelf to communicate with his daughter.
So this made us very happy. Bugmain tweeted, like, what if Kofefe, Trump's tweet, was really Matthew McConaughey trying to...
reaching through the Tesseract to type out COVID.
To warn everyone of COVID. I just love if Trump was, having one of his mini strokes that he probably has all the time, and was tweeting, despite the negative press, Kofefe, and he was trying to... Matthew McConaughey's like, there's COVID, you gotta warn him. Wait, who did I sound like?
You sounded like
Holly Hunter.
Yeah, you sound like Holly Hunter. That was it.
Guys, wait.
There's COVID. Dash away from the COVID.
I can't tell which one of us actually can do a better Holly Hunter.
You
but
can.
Well, Matthew McConaughey's like, COVID is coming.
Wait, let me try it. Murph, you gotta stay. No, it's Bill Clinton.
You did Bill Clinton.
It's Bill Clinton.
Don't do Bill Clinton.
All right. I'm Matthew McConaughey. I'm from Texas.
I'm warning
stay
you.
Away from the COVID.
So he knew, which is what that cowboy movie was about. No, it was about AIDS. What was that movie?
Dallas Buyers Club.
Dallas Buyers Club.
Yeah.
It was about COVID. So that was a great tweet. Recommend you follow us on Twitter as well. I've got some great tweets.
We got some good tweets.
Some great tweets, everybody. Okay,
Share the one you wanted
this
to,
one is from Dan Price, Seattle. When I say it like that, it sounds like we have a fan.
Yeah.
But no, this is someone who does not know
They
me.
put this into the world of their own volition for their own.
Yes. So at Dan Price, Seattle says, they said, don't worry, we'll have your stimulus as soon as the election is over. It's been over for almost 2 weeks. Meanwhile, we got $1,200 one time 232 days ago. They gave us $5.17 a day. Meanwhile, airlines got a $50 billion bailout and have laid off 90,000 people so far. I gotta say, 50 billion is like 50 crocodiles. That's how much you can buy. 50 crocodilians, which is also what the lizard people are called. Crocodilians.
Oh, good to know.
I think.
We should go after them.
We should.
Okay.
In the sewer, drain the sewer.
That's right. So let's leave COVID behind,
Leave
like
it
the
on the
president
floor.
has.
Yes.
And come
Even
back
though it's in his
stronger
body still.
and full of steroids.
Yes.
And let's talk about our subject for today.
Yeah, we decided that, even though we talk about topical things, like Neosporin, we still want to really focus on just interesting tidbits about U.S. history, because you can rage listen to your Chapos and your pod saves in your own time. So we thought an interesting, I won't say relic because he's still
He's very active.
an interesting fixture of American U.S. history and politics as people picture,
especially liberal
politics,
contemporary liberal politics,
is
Mr.
Aaron Sorkin. Come on in.
Hey, he's here.
Walking and talking. Should we do this next part in the walking and talking style?
Yeah, we'll walk and talk.
Yeah, so it'll be like, begin.
Okay. I don't even know how to, like, I have to be like, I
It'll be like, all right, Kyle, you're the one that has to talk about Aaron Sorkin.
All right, yeah, so I got this report on Sorkin. We have his filmography here. We've got his...
filmography. I'm not looking for his top 10 Criterion picks. Get back to the real stuff.
All right, well, I got his televisionography here.
Yeah.
All right. It's very Howard Hawks. It's very snappy.
Howard Hawks and talks.
Howard Hawk and talk. So Aaron Sorkin, American screenwriter and now filmmaker, famous director.
Hasn't he made films before? He made Social Network.
He did not make Social Network. He wrote The Social Network.
Okay.
David Fincher made The Social Network.
Oh, David Fincher.
David Fincher. No,
so...
Molly's Game was his first directed film.
Molly's Game?
Molly's Game, which friend of the show Chris Hodemy says is very not good but fun to watch. I've never seen it. And then Trial of the Chicago 7, which Lucia and I watched today and we'll talk about, is only his second directed film.
Okay, so Aaron Sorkin, media man.
Media man.
Media man.
The man of media. He is a 59-year-old
Yes.
New Yorker.
So when a lot of people think about American politics, a lot of them think about The West Wing, which is a show. The West Wing, it refers to the right wing on Air Force One. Which...
Wait, no, that's not it. Of course, the West Wing is the part of the White House where the offices are, the Oval Offices.
Because they are shaped like eggs. Because to represent the birth of the nation
not
of the eagle.
Birth of a nation, problematic.
Yeah, so is American White House, built by slaves, rebuilt.
You should call it the frickin' Orange House until that Cheeto gets out.
Yeah, they're gonna have to use a big vacuum. Anyway, so a lot of people think of the West Wing.
Especially, and I keep bringing this back to it, but it is important to stress, especially liberals and Democrats.
Liberals, Gen X liberals and Democrats.
The West Wing looms very, very, very large in the liberal imagination. It is, to mainstream Dems, basically what, I don't know what the equivalent would be. Rush Limbaugh?
Well, no, I mean, I think that, so in the West Wing, Martin Sheen plays the president. Ironically, he looks a lot like Donald Trump. Yeah. But anyway, he plays this noble but flawed president. Democratic liberal president. And a lot of people, a lot of liberals, when they think of like the ideal president, they think of him. I think it's
Jed Bartlett, President
Jed Bartlett, which he's named after and supposed to be descended from Josiah Bartlett, who was, I think, one of the signers of the Declaration. Yeah. So it's all a lot of like American U.S. history porn. It's not radical though. It's very like fans of liberal fans of like like it's like it was like the past Hamilton fans, and yeah. I feel like they the equivalent. I feel like the equivalent civility porn. Yes, I feel like the equivalent is honestly Ronald Reagan, even though he really was president. I think people think of when they say like we just need a good, someone like Pete Buttigieg. We just need a good, moral, liberal president. I feel like it's the way they think of Reagan as like just this.
Maybe with a little bit of even like John Wayne of just
all-American.
Because it's with the conservative ethos, it's very much like we need a good, solid, moral man who will come in here and kick those commies out. And the liberal imagination is we need this moral intellectual who can sit down and civilly discuss and come to terms with anybody.
Yeah, and it's like liberals never got to see, and this is a common thing with like we never got to see John Lennon or Kurt Cobain. I almost said John McCain. John Lennon, John McCain.
John
Legend. We never got to see them sell out or make mistakes or, start a new genre of music, whatever. So I feel like Jed Bartlett has that kind of like, what if Kennedy had lived?
Yeah, liberals have
and he actually played Kennedy in a miniseries.
Yeah, liberals have to have a fantasy president because every liberal Ronald Reagan has been a disappointment. So,
yeah, it was right after. No, it was concurrent with the Clinton.
The Bush administration.
Okay, so it was right after the Clinton.
It was part of the reason why the West Wing became such a huge thing that looms so large in the minds of liberals, is that it was basically a fantasy version of what if a Democrat was president instead of George W. Bush. That was basically the emotional release of its original airing.
Yeah. Like how Buffy was a fantasy of like, what if women could slay vampires?
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of just regular Van Helsings.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Yes.
And I want to make a clarification here. I'm not saying liberal pejoratively.
No, we're not. Just descriptively.
As opposed to the more structural or Marxist or radical organized left.
Yeah, and I'd say the organized left and progressives and more radicals, I think plenty of them have guilty pleasures of the West Wing, but wouldn't admit it because so many people just grew up watching it.
And they wouldn't admit it because there are a lot of liberals who treat the West Wing like serious politics. The West Wing is not serious politics.
They talk about it like Harry Potter, like, we need to defeat Trump because he's Voldemort.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, okay, but the West Wing was a TV show.
And the biggest problem with that comes through in our actual politics is this myth of the noble Republican.
Yes.
This is a huge thing that Sorkin's very, very into.
This is why it's more problematic, because
Yes.
we're not saying we're against metaphor. Like, I think if somebody uses Harry Potter, who, J.K. Rowling's gone off the deep end.
We're not even going to address...
Yeah, she's jumped off
She's
the
off the
turf.
planet.
She's off the planet. Metaphors and art... I'm not saying art is bad.
No,
I think
fact,
it's
art
amazing.
is good.
We're pro
In
art.
fact, we're both art creators.
Yeah.
We're both writers and performers.
Yeah, so the fact that people do, think like, well, Neville Longbottom stood up to Voldemort, so I'm going to stand up to Trump. It's like, okay, that's great. Good for you.
Yeah.
The problem is when people think, well, the good guys won at the end of this. That means if we just play by these rules, yada yada, this is going to happen. And that's the thing about The West Wing is about most of Aaron Sorkin's oeuvre is that he often has the kind of bastard that you love to hate, and that, which, I mean, I think this is why he has resonated with so many people, is we all have bastards that we love or love to hate, is that he has a lot of those, like, even at the end of Chicago 7, like, wow, that person wanted to lock me up and hates my guts, but even they, have a good side, and even they are gonna cooperate.
It's one thing to find personal inspiration in these things.
Yeah.
It's another to think that they accurately describe the way the world works.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
Yeah, same with Parks and Recreation,
Absolutely.
which is a show we love, but it's like, and the show did do a good job of, Leslie Knope does fail a lot.
Yeah, because she
does
runs up
get
against people who
stonewalled.
are bad faith, who do not want to work with her.
Yeah, Jeremy Jam, as far as I remember, he never gets
I don't think he's ever redeemed.
He's never redeemed. And more like a Sorkin show is the idea, just like on 30 Rock, also of like Liz Lemon versus Jack Donaghy, Leslie and Ron Swanson. I've seen people, be like, yeah, Ron Swanson would really hate Leslie and vice versa. And it's like, no, we all know lots of people with...
On an interpersonal level, absolutely. And the genius of 30 Rock is that Liz is actually a lot like Jack. She doesn't realize that. She thinks that they're more oppositional than they actually are.
Exactly.
The problem, basically, what it ultimately comes down to, and this is just a general political point, is in the Aaron Sorkin imagination, and therefore in the imagination of a lot of
the
mainstream
Sorkiverse.
liberals, in the Sorkiverse, all you have to do is be right and convince enough people that you're right. If you can sit down with people and explain to them why you're right and why you've thought this through and why it's smart, then they'll get on board.
It's the ultimate nerd logic.
Exactly. It's that idea of all you have to do is to be right. Because it takes for granted that the other people in this system are operating in good faith, just from different premises. And as long as you can get them to understand your premise, you can come to a place of agreement.
Yes, and I will say that I think that's how a lot of people come away from shows like The West Wing or things like Harry Potter or whatever, as this good versus evil. If you just say, I'm really good, that you'll win. But I do think another thing that makes Sorkin's work more lasting, and I will say I have not watched all the seasons of The West Wing, is I do notice in The West Wing, when the characters have conflict and disagreements, they often will end it not with a, like, oh, you're right, I should have come to this conclusion all along, I'm finally listening. But a lot of the times it does actually have a, like, we're both coming at this from an emotional place. Yeah. And we're not going to see eye to eye.
But it still ends with compromise in a way that is unrealistic. I mean, there's an episode of The West Wing where, in order to make a point, President Bartlett appoints a conservative Republican to the Supreme Court. And it's like, to make a point, basically. And
it's just like Joe Biden. That's what people like about Joe Biden, is they're like, he respected that Amy Coney Barrett's a woman, and that she became a judge. It's like, we don't give a shit.
It's very much...
She wants to kill you.
It's very much liking the rules. I mean, Democrats think they're Lisa Simpson, but they're all Martin Prince. And that's,
They're all Wiggum.
Yeah. But so, the other view of politics, besides this kind of everyone's operating from good faith, ceteris paribus, grand bargain thing, is the idea that these are competing interests that have power interests. And that you can try to compromise, but at the end of the day, what you need to do is attain power and wield it for your interests.
There was a quote I just saw of McConnell. It was like, Biden or Obama, someone was trying to convince him of something and gave him their whole pitch, and he just said, like, you're acting as if I care, or
You're
something.
under the mistaken impression that I care. Something
Yeah,
like that.
and it's like one of those things where Democrats are actually like Sideshow Bob, where they keep stepping on the rake, and they keep thinking that they're going to get Bart this time, and Bart keeps outsmarting him because Bart has no morals.
You know what it is?
Yeah.
We like to think that this is, the West Wing, Jed Bartlett running for president against, who was it that plays Richie? I don't know, the old guy, old actor. Doesn't matter. But really, it's as if Leslie Knope was running for president against Tywin Lannister.
Oof.
That's basically
That hurts.
Yeah, like that's what we're dealing with.
I mean, Game of Thrones, which we're fans of, and Kyle's read the books, but we were not stoked on the ending. Yeah. And, of course, the show has lots to criticize, whatever. But it really felt very close to... it felt like one of the best political dramas.
The politics in Game of Thrones are much stronger because there's no illusion of civility in that way. I mean, if you look... Because I'm a huge, massive fan of the books. I like the show a lot, but that's tempered by the last season, which I do not like. But if you look at what happens when Robert Baratheon dies, the Democratic response is, well, Joffrey's king now.
Yeah.
He's his son. He's king.
And let's not even criticize him. Give them time to grieve.
Let's not worry about the Westerosi Truanon that's saying he's not even his son, really. That's pointing that out. But the Republican response, which is right now the response that understands power, says, well, I don't want Joffrey to be the king. I'm Stannis. I'm going to be the fucking king. And there's an opening, so I'm going to raise my troops and we'll go get it. And then Renly says, actually, I want to be the king. And there's an opening, so I'm going to raise my bannisters and we're going to go get it. We're going to go to war for it. There's an understanding that at the end of the day, all the rules are just rules. All the rules, all the regulations are just things people have said.
And
they only have power when they are recognized. And if you do not recognize them anymore, they cease to have power. Now you have the power.
Yeah.
And I'm not even saying that's a healthy way to go about politics. I'm saying that is what the Republican Party does nowadays. And we're going to keep losing if we don't meet that.
Thank you for that very Ben from Parks and Rec monologue. As you are wearing a very Ben from Parks and Rec shirt. Absolutely. And I mean, I think Ned, if you haven't watched Game of Thrones yet, fast forward for 30 seconds.
No, if you haven't watched Game of Thrones yet, listen. The show came out 10 years ago.
This is exactly...
No
if you haven't,
spoilers.
No, nobody has anything else to do. If you haven't seen Game of Thrones, watch it now as your fun pandemic
This is the only time where that's okay.
Yeah. So, just the character of Ned Stark, he is like the consummate noble dude. And he's similar to, say, Bartlett. He's noble, he's a father, he's complicated.
Yeah, he is
and
Bartlett.
He has done fucked up things just like Bartlett has. And unlike in the West Wing where he keeps getting to thrive and whatever, Ned chooses the noble route and he ignores any of the warning signs and intuition in the name of what is noble and respectful to this family that he has some allegiance to, and he gets got.
Yeah,
and it is the inciting incident of the entire show, which is what I think makes George R. R. Martin so brilliant. Is it's like he proved from the very beginning that like you can't play by these rules of the Game of the Thrones, so that all the other things that happen on the show, people having weddings that are supposed to be, putting families together and all these things, it's like that's all bullshit, because all these people are doing is thinking of ways to fuck you over and get power. And it's like when we do this pageantry of Dianne Feinstein hugging Lindsey Graham and Biden talking about how much he loves all his Republican friends, it's just like
every time Democrats sit down to work out a deal with the Republican Party, it turns out like Ned Stark at the Sept of Baelor. And it's basically like, it's like, okay, well, we'll send you to the wall and it'll be fine. And then Mitch McConnell comes out and goes, actually, cut his head off.
Yeah, and it's weird because I feel like we've all seen this, and I feel like liberals and Democrats have seen this and have gone like, oh man, like, why do we keep getting fucked over? And they turn by Republicans, and I've seen this so much after the election, is they turn all their hatred on their fellow people, their fellow workers, as all Trump voters are racist, all Trump voters are evil and bad, which I'm sure plenty are, or like, and that all
Plenty
Trump...
of Biden voters are racist and evil and bad,
Exactly.
too.
But this idea of, like, all these Trump voters want me dead. And the thing is, like, that is really hurtful on the American collective spirit and psyche it's honestly, in so many ways, Republicans have brought this on us by having such bigoted things be part of their platform, that it's like, I can think of some Republicans I know that don't care if you're trans, don't care whatever, but, like, they are supporting someone who, is basically a Nazi. And so it's like that de facto could make, to a lot of liberals, they're seeing it as like, wow, I can't even walk into a grocery store, or I can't even travel to certain states because all these people want me dead, or all these people hate me. And so a lot of people that we know are living in constant fear, and just a feeling in general of like, if so many people in my country voted for Trump, then I'm not wanted by most of this country.
Yeah.
And that isn't true, but the feeling is completely valid.
Absolutely.
But that's an example of, I think, this, because it's like, they keep getting, and the people that are supposed to represent us keep getting fucked over by the Republicans that really do want to take away abortions and really do hate trans people and really...
that want to do bad things.
Yeah,
People
and they keep working with them, and then the people keep getting punished, and then they turn their ire onto regular working class people and voters who have more in common with them than the Democrats that are supposed to represent us. And I think it's been hurting our soul, and it is such a weird thing to simultaneously, I feel like, bipartisanship in terms of everyday life, like, I think it's a reality that you can't shut everyone out. We're all going to be forced to be around people that we disagree with on some spectrum politically. And I think that, like I said, we do have more in common with these people, and we should find common ground. And that's how you change the hearts and minds of people.
You find common ground with your fellow Americans.
Yeah.
You don't wait for our elites to find common ground with each other. You know why? Because the common ground that Dianne Feinstein and Lindsey Graham have, they don't share with us.
Yeah.
George Carlin said it right. Sorry to get very cheesy and quote George Carlin. But he said, it's a big club and you ain't in it.
Yeah.
That
and he
is the
also
reality.
said, party on. Wait, no, that's what...
I'm sure he said party
No,
on,
but he
dudes.
also said...
you're thinking of Wayne's World.
He said, be excellent to each other.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
So, I want...
Wait. So, I'm just saying that, so, simultaneously, I feel it's imperative that we promote bipartisanship in our personal lives and abolish it in, when dealing with the federal government, because bipartisanship, it's kind of...
You don't like what they agree on. You're not going to like what they agree on.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Bipartisanship is not a goal in and of itself.
Yeah.
It matters what they are agreeing on. I remember hearing this phrase never took root, and I get why. I remember hearing the alternative term transpartisanship, which, again, I understand that trans came to mean something beyond that context after this term was coined. But what it basically means is instead of bipartisanship, instead of looking for where the parties overlap, which is usually bad stuff, it's people that are further out on the edges finding places where they agree that crosses over the entire party thing. The example it used was the transpartisan consensus between progressives and hardcore libertarians about drug policy. Like, it's not bipartisan. The main parties don't agree on this.
Wow.
But you can find individuals. Your Dennis Kucinich and your Ron Paul can come together to argue against the Iraq War.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
You can find Bernie and Rand Paul trying to get weed legalized.
And that's why I think the mainstream media would say, like, look, libertarian, voter or Trump voter, they're going for Bernie, or look, they're whatever, like, as to say that Bernie is the same as Republicans or libertarians, and it's like, no, that's not.
Ralph Nader wrote an entire book about this.
And that's why there are Republicans that voted for Joe that still hate Joe and are Republican, because they,
vote your interests. Vote and support policies based on what you think is good. And that sounds simple and it sounds obvious, but that is not how most people in this country vote. No. Most people treat this like it's team sports. It's not. Let me tell you something loud and fucking clear. Joe Biden has no more personal interest in your personal well-being than Donald Trump does. But his policy stances, his platform, will make your life better than Donald Trump's will. That is what matters. These people are not your friends. These people are not going to save you. Vote for the people who have policies and ideas that are going to make your life better, make your project easier, whatever that is, and that will actually do it. That's all you can do. That's all you can do. And the great lie of Sorkinism is that there's anything more to it than that. And there's anything more noble or poetic to politics. There's not. I've worked in politics. It is not noble. It is not poetic. It is a dirty, kind of awful place to work, but it's where you go to get things done. So focus on getting things done. Symbolic victories are nothing. They are nothing at all. Get real promises out of your elected officials and hold them accountable. Or else you're just a dupe.
So Sorkinism is what you just said.
Yeah.
And then Snorkinism is when you're a Smurf that lives under the sea. So on the idea of, what was the term? Like false victories or...
Symbolic victories.
Symbolic victories. I feel like that is an interesting way to tie into the Sorkin movie we just watched.
Right. Which we're going to do a little review of.
Yeah, which we'll do a little review of. Because... being a movie about the 60s and...
What's the movie?
Civil rights movement, the Sorkin...
The Trial of the Chicago 7.
Okay, the Trial of the Chicago 7. So, it's about the Chicago 7 in the 60s, which Kyle will explain better. And, anti-war, anti-Vietnam movement, civil rights movement, Black Panther Party. And... at the end, you do feel like you feel hope, you feel moved, and you do feel like there's a victory. And interestingly enough, politically, there wasn't a victory. It's just like there's some quote about, like, we had the best music in the 60s. We had the best violence activists. We had the best art. We had the best paintings. We had the best poets. And yet... we still had Vietnam. We still, had police brutality. Like, it's this really weird thing where art is an observation, it's a reflection of the times, and it can change people's hearts and minds, but it doesn't stop a bomb, Yeah. And that's really heartbreaking because I definitely grew up with that idea. I grew up listening to 60s poets and musicians and believing in peace, and then to really see nothing has changed at all. It is really heartbreaking, and it's interesting because I do think that is something that is in this movie, but by the end, you still come away with it feeling like, we won! But when it comes down to the brass tacks, like, things, I won't say got worse, but, like, a lot of these problems were not solved.
I was looking for a quote I thought was from Tom Lehrer, but I couldn't find it about basically that idea.
Can you tell people who Tom Lehrer is?
Yeah, Tom Lehrer was a satirist, a musical comedian, started in the late 50s, and he's still alive, and I don't think he's doing much anymore, but he wrote some great satirical songs. And I remember somebody asked him, like, his quote, I actually remember, somebody said, like, do you think satire can change the world, or whatever? And he said, there were a lot of satirists in Weimar Germany. And that That's the reality.
Yeah, that's what that quote also hits me really hard. And it hit me really hard when I was given a book that was of political cartoons from, Weimar Germany and World War II. And it's like, those political cartoons were so spot on. Even when some of the public didn't know how genocidal Nazism was.
They knew it was bad.
They knew it was bad, and they suspected it, and lots of people didn't know about, and it's very clear in that art. It's like, and a lot of those people were killed, and it's when there's, and a lot of, curated libraries were burned that erased so much of progress that we had, and so it's like we lost, and that's really heartbreaking. Of like, people, you can have, and that's why when people go resist, why it's so painful, I think, for a lot of people, especially leftists and Bernie people, is that we were looking for tangible solutions and to prevent someone like Trump, and they are hoping the mainstream liberal idea of resistance is hoping if we point out that Trump bad enough, or that this is not normal enough, then people are going to come to their senses. I laid out the best argument. We're going to win.
They think as a referee.
Yeah.
If they make the case strong enough that someone's going to come in and do something. But the closest thing to referee we have are judges, like the guy in Trial of the Chicago 7.
Yeah, and that's honestly, like, we're both fans of Hamilton, and we've seen it.
Yeah.
The music is genius. But a lot of the ways that we look at history and politics is like, well, once people understood how bad slavery was, then we stopped it. Once people understood that this war was wrong, it was over. And it's
you
like,
can always find people saying it long before.
Exactly. There were always
when Christopher Columbus landed on the not Columbus, Cortez. When Hernan Cortez came here to Mexico, there were priests that he came with that were saying, "Hey, we shouldn't be killing all these people."
Yeah, there
we
always
these are
was.
People. Like there is always dissent. There's always somebody on the right side of history.
There are always artists and satirists that are,
somebody knows.
And that's why
because morality is not subjective. There are things that are right, there are things that are wrong.
Yeah.
And wherever you
that's
look,
observable.
Wherever you look, there's always somebody that knows. Even if they're the only voice saying it.
Yeah, and
there's always somebody that knows.
And obviously there's so many people that have been lost to time, so many writers and amazing people that that we don't read, like we read Shakespeare in every single class. But still, when you look at Shakespeare, the reason his stuff is lasting is not because some of it's romantic or because people say doth. It's because it's so well observed. And it's so, like, when Trump was sort of being dethroned, I was looking at all these amazing quotes from Richard III, or Richard II? Richard III?
I think he did both.
About all the different ways that kings have existed and been dethroned, and all the different ways they've fallen. And it sounds like one line sounds like it's about Bill Clinton, one line sounds like it's about Trump, one line, whatever. Like, it's so timeless.
Yeah.
And like, did it do anything? It shaped our culture, and it shaped our moral way of thinking, etc.
But did it end the British monarchy?
Yeah.
Did it end those wars? No, it didn't.
It's such an important aspect of society, but we need to understand that just saying Trump is Voldemort, is not actually...
Tweeting is not actually anything. Sorry, like...
Well, I mean, tweeting, we've seen, Twitter movements have been able to do social pressure that have made things happen.
True. I'm just thinking of the resistance on Twitter. Like, just posting Trump is
pointing
Voldemort,
out what we know.
It doesn't do anything. If you're not organizing, if you're not getting out there and making real change, there's just a lot of performative...
Well, I mean, that doesn't make a big difference. That doesn't affect Trump, right?
Yeah.
At the top.
Yeah.
But the reason we do say tweet at Gavin Newsom or share your stories is because it ties back into the, like, we don't need bipartisanism ship at the top, but we do on in our communities,
Yeah.
we need to be talking to other people and sharing our stories and sharing our art, because that's how we change the hearts and minds. Is that, like, there have been all these studies that Republicans, they don't empathize until it happens to them.
I want to make something really clear. When I'm not saying that art or satire or posting is bad. I'm saying you're not going to take down the government doing it. It has a place, and it's important to do. The problem is when you present yourself as basically the heirs of the French resistance against Nazi occupation of Vichy France, which is basically what the resistance is referencing. That is not the same thing.
No.
You are not hiding Jews in your attic. You are not getting... some people are actually getting shot in the street, but that's not the same people. And there just needs to be an understanding of what the place is for these different things. Satire, art, posting, community building, maybe the most important thing in the world.
Yeah.
But you cannot expect that to create the material change.
By pointing out that Lindsey Graham is bad, that's not going to make anything happen to Lindsey Graham. By telling your people, by talking to people about your personal experience with discrimination at the hands of Lindsey Graham.
There you go. That's material.
Just making that connection with another person.
Calling your representative. All of us. If 100,000 people called Dianne Feinstein and said, this is fucked up, whatever, that's closer to making a difference.
Yeah. I mean, I've called Gavin Newsom quite a bit.
You have. I'm talking about mass
He hasn't
movements
done
and things.
shit. No, I know. I just hate these people.
I do too.
But yeah, so it's one of those things where our fandom, there's nothing wrong with fandom, but it's not...
just don't mistake it for activism.
Yeah.
Fandom's not activism.
And
It's
that's also why I think we can enjoy stuff like Sorkin's work if we don't put it on a pedestal.
Spoiler alert, I like The West Wing. I think it's fun to watch.
Yeah, it's adorable. It's made me fall asleep sometimes, but it I think it has a cast of characters that all have like slightly different political views, which is cool to see. It's a really good time capsule of what TV was like back then, and just people in general. Yeah. What Bradley Whitford looked like back then. So yeah, it's like The West Wing holds up for what that is, and then I feel like other things of Sorkin, like The Social Network, it's an interesting movie if you don't treat it like it's the gospel of Mark Zuckerberg, because it is propaganda. Like,
I'd
not
be interested
necessarily.
to see a sequel. Yeah, I'd be interested to see it 10 years later.
Jesse Eisenberg's like shaved his eyebrows and he's like Lex Luthor.
Yeah, a much, I think, more interesting treatment of tech than The Social Network, which I think is a great movie, is Steve Jobs, which he wrote.
I
the
forgot
Michael Fassbender
about
Steve
that.
Jobs, which I think is a great movie. I think it's very good. But let's talk about the Trial of Chicago 7 a little bit, and then wrap up, because we're already in an hour.
Wow.
What do you think of the movie?
So I was surprised that I enjoyed the Chicago 7. It's a story I'd never actually heard. And I thought it was going to be a lot more Sorkin-y and cutesy in that way, like The Social Network is, and I think like how Steve Jobs is, where, a lot of walk and talks. Like, Sorkin and the Gilmore Girls, they have some similarities in terms of how the dialogue is written.
It's very arch.
Yeah, there's also a lot of musical theater references. Yeah, Sports Night is like The West Wing, but sports.
Yeah, and Studio 60 is like The West Wing, but SNL.
Yeah, and Newsroom is like
The West Wing,
but
CNN.
Republicans and CNN. They're all sort of fanfic of different...
They're all, what if Aaron Sorkin was in charge?
Yeah.
How would things be? What if Aaron Sorkin got to rule the world?
Yeah, and...
it's like The Wire, but instead of each season being about a different element of Baltimore corruption, each show is a different field that Aaron Sorkin would like to control.
Exactly.
Show exactly how he'd do it.
So, I was expecting it to be way more like that. And then, it instead, felt felt pretty true to being a historical biopic.
Yeah.
Can you give people some backstory on
Yeah. So
the
first of
plot?
all, after looking it up, it's not a very historical biopic. A
In
lot
terms
of
of
it
what
is
happened?
is fanciful.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Including the ending.
Aaron Sorkin? Fanciful?
Yeah.
Ugh, the ending. What I don't get... Okay, what the hell? So this was... revolves around a court case, right?
It does. Which did happen.
Yes. And there are transcripts of court cases. And so I get really pissed off when I'm watching something and I know there's transcripts of what exactly these people were saying and that is not at all what they were saying.
But it's more satisfying this way.
But it's not satisfying afterward.
I know. Because I read an interview with Rennie Davis, who is one of the people in it. I'll explain real quick. So, the Chicago 7 or Chicago 8, it goes back and forth how it's referred to, was a trial that was at first of 8 people that were all being tried after a riot at the 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago. They were all being tried for inciting the riot. And they all represented kind of different elements of the New Left, what was then called the New Left. Tom Hayden and Rennie Davis were both leaders of the Students for a Democratic Society, which, I don't know, comparable maybe to like the DSA. Like it was sort of it was a leftist, it was a socialist organization, but it was one that was kind of trying to be respectable, trying to impact real politics. At first it was. And then it got more Marxist-Leninist. Carl Oglesby got kicked out for being insufficiently Marxist. And then you had David Dellinger, who was a group called the Mobilization to End the War. They called it the MOB, who was a religious pacifist. He was a strict anti-war, conscientious objector of World War II. You had Jerry Rubin and Abby Hoffman there with the Youth International Party.
Abby Hoffman, not to be confused with Gabby Hoffman.
Not at all Gabby Hoffman.
And played by Sacha Baron Cohen.
Correct. And then you had Bobby Seale, who was the leader of the Black Panthers.
Still alive.
Still alive.
And Rubin is played by
Jeremy Strong.
Jeremy Strong from Succession, which it's worth watching just to see his performance. I feel because it's
Eddie Redmayne is Tom Hayden. The performances are very strange.
When Eddie Redmayne showed up, I was trying to remember his character, and I could only think of Newt Scamberger.
Yeah,
so I was like, "Is that Scamberger?"
Mark Rylance is the lawyer, Bill Kunstler. Yahya Abdul-Mateen II is Bobby Seale. It's a good cast. The guy that plays
it's
Arthur
a really
Lee
good
in
cast.
Zodiac, Dave Dellinger.
Even when you Google some of them, you're like, "Oh, that person doesn't look exactly like it."
Yeah.
It's a good cast. It's not like when you watch other, like, the CBGV movie and you're like, oh,
Terrible.
what the fuck?
So Rennie Davis was interviewed, though, about the movie by a publication called Westward, which I believe is an alt weekly in Colorado. And he doesn't hate the movie, but there's a lot that he says is inaccurate. For one, there's a big moment at the end, which I guess I won't spoil because it's a recent film and it's powerful, that just plain didn't happen. Mm-hmm. They also mentioned that Bobby Seale gets bound and gagged, right, by the judge, who played by Frank Langella, and is a real asshole, for contempt of court, which was a big deal, obviously huge deal. And Rennie Davis points out that when this happened in real life, he was bound and gagged for like 4 days of the trial. It wasn't just like that afternoon, the way it kind of appears in the movie. And he said that it was very brutal. Like there was like blood at the edges of his mouth, where they kept like tightening the gags.
So can you explain who he was?
Bobby Seale?
Yeah.
Yeah, Bobby.
And who he still is.
Yeah, he's still active. He's still kicking around.
So this is a very brutal part of the movie, and yet just like every single, like how in was it Hidden Figures, the one about space?
Yeah.
How it's like is Bruce Willis the guy in that, I think? Michael Keaton. Well, so it's basically like, oh, there's this discrimination against black women by NASA, and then the white savior's like, hey, come on in.
It's Michael Keaton doing the same thing he does in this movie.
Yeah, and that character doesn't exist that person was like a composite.
In Hidden Figures.
Hidden Figures. So this is very similar where it's like, you have Bobby Seale, and this horrific thing happens to him, and then
it's still kind of downplayed.
And Joseph Gordon-Levitt basically saves him.
Yeah, so
a minute.
Bobby Seale is the head of the Black Panther Party. He's a close friend of Fred Hampton.
The head of the whole Black Panther Party?
I believe he's the chairman of the entire Black Panther Party.
Wow.
And a close friend of Fred Hampton, who is the head of the Chicago branch, who's murdered by the FBI. And Bobby Seale was also on trial Now, technically, his trial was kind of separate. He had his own lawyer who was in the hospital, which is true. He couldn't be there for it. And so he didn't have representation. And it is alleged that he was basically put up there with the other 7 to scare the jury, because the Black Panthers were scary, because he had no connection with them. He didn't know any of them. He was in and out of Chicago. He had nothing to do with the riot. He had no connection at all, basically. But they wanted a Panther on the stand. And so there's a lot of back and forth with Bobby Seale, especially in the movie, because he doesn't have a lawyer.
Yeah.
And the judge keeps saying that Bill Kunstler, the celebrity radical lawyer that represented the 7, should represent Seale. And Seale says, no, I'd like to represent myself. The judge says, I don't recognize that. And so finally,
in the movie, they never let him...
they never let him speak.
Never let him speak.
And so after he attempts to several times, the judge puts him in contempt of court several times, and which finally ends with him ordering him to be bound and gagged.
Yeah, which plenty of other people in the courtroom are held in contempt, but they never are treated that way.
Yeah, to be held in contempt is just like a charge. It's a small charge, basically recognizing that you are not allowing the proceedings of the trial to go apace.
Yeah, I think the movie did a good job of, showing that it was clearly racism and, and so they bound and gag him in the courtroom, and it's a in the film, like, everyone looks horrified.
Yeah.
And Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who's one of the lawyers,
he's the prosecutor for the
prosecutor, he's like, this is wrong, and then they kind of stop it, and so apparently that didn't happen in real life. Instead, it was 4 days of him bound and gagged. And I mean, they had a moment where it's like, can you breathe? But it's still like, it was not very long in the movie. Like, it got the point across that this was barbaric, but it was not historically accurate to how barbaric it was, and that obviously no one saved him.
Yeah.
And if you really should Google Bobby Seale, because you will see the court drawings, which in the movie they do sort of do some tribute to the courtroom artists, which is cool because those drawings are really iconic.
Yeah.
But there's art of Bobby Seale bound and gagged, and it's
horrific.
It's horrific.
I'm going to read what Rainy Davis says about it.
Okay.
He says, you see Bobby wanting to defend himself because his lawyer was recovering from surgery. He tries to cross-examine a witness. You get a sense of the build-up. Then when he comes out chained and gagged, you don't get an appreciation for the magnitude of what happened. Seale was held in chains for 4 days, not one like in the movie. I remember sitting next to Bobby and seeing blood come out of his mouth. They tried to press gauze into his mouth by force. The first day the jury could hear him. Then they kept increasing the pressure. It was startling to see Bobby chained and gagged in the American courtroom because he tried to represent himself. And it wasn't just America. Africa heard him. Europe heard him. A world event took place. You don't get any of that quality in the movie.
Yeah. And
is true.
When I was watching the movie, I was Googling Bobby Seale right before that scene started, and I saw that image and I was like, what the fuck? So it's like, it obviously was iconic. And so that doesn't really get illustrated. I mean, and then also, our kitty's rousing from her slumber. But also, the only thing that I won't say justifies it at all, but an interesting wrinkle is that Bobby Seale was also wanted for homicide in Connecticut, and he denied it, and the charges were dropped.
Yeah.
Which is great. But that's also like holy shit, or like another example of all the things that were stacked against all these different leftists, and especially the Black Panther Party, is they could accuse you of anything. Yeah, it was accusing him of killing a cop. They could accuse you of anything, and every time these civil rights leaders try to play by the rules, they get assassinated or they get bound and gagged. And so I think, and they talk about, all the different assassinations that were going on in the 60s. Yeah. And
he's great, by the way. Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, that plays him, is great. He's phenomenal.
So good. And yeah, I feel like despite the Sorkinism idea of like, if you just do the right thing, it'll all work out, the message of this movie, I don't think, is that.
I agree.
And it really shows how the civil rights leaders and the Black Panthers had everything stacked against them, and they could just be murdered willy-nilly or bound and gagged and no consequences.
The other thing that I noticed that Rainy Davis said is that the depiction of Jerry Rubin he thought was off.
Mm-hmm.
He said Sacha Baron Cohen plays Abby Hoffman. He thought that was great.
Sacha Baron Cohen was incredible.
Very
Between this and Borat, I think
Good
just give him an Oscar.
Yeah. But he said that Jerry Rubin, played by Jeremy Strong, basically he said that in real life he was a lot smarter and sharper.
He's
and funnier
basically
than that.
Cheech and Chong.
Yeah, he's basically like, hey man, Dave's not here, man, and
it was a weird choice on
and he's
Sorkin's part.
He's funny in the movie, but apparently, he was much smarter and funnier and sharper in real life. And of course, after all of this, Jerry Rubin became a stockbroker, and tragically was killed crossing Wilshire in L.A., crossing the street, hit by a car.
Another reason that you should Google Bobby Seale is because he's still alive, and he's adorable.
Yeah.
I mean, he was handsome when he was younger, but he now is an old man, and he wears Black Lives Matter shirts and black berets.
Yeah.
And so it's like, just Google image search him, be prepared for the courtroom drawing, but then also look at pictures of him now and read some interviews. Because it's one of those things where this is all still so recent. A great thing that they had in the movie was showing the movie was had a lot of historical issues, but I did really like how it was edited. It was it was like they had really good montages, like montages of all the undercover FBI people that were infiltrating and were saying like, I sell dope, or I'm a hippie, and then they really worked for the FBI, because when we read the Charles Manson book Chaos, the book about the Manson murders, all these people partying with like the Mamas and the Papas and Manson and all these Hollywood, they're all feds, and they also sold drugs, and they also were hooking up, like but yeah, they were all informants.
Crazy.
And so when you think about what the 60s was like, and in the peace, love, and all these groups, it's like a lot of those people were just informants, or like psychos. And then and there definitely was a criminal element too. A lot of people that were doing those drugs and selling them were involved with the mob. And then so that book Chaos is awesome. And then it makes you think about, okay, if that was going on with leftist movements then, how many leftists on the internet, Black Lives Matter members on the internet, etc., are just undercover cops?
Yeah, I will say that the movie works, and I did enjoy it. But I will point out, I just saw that Bobby Seale, who is alive, has also written a screenplay about this.
What?
That has not been produced. So
God
just
damn
make
it.
that, Hollywood.
Why?
It's called Seize the Time, The Eighth Defendant. It's based on an autobiography he wrote.
Fuck.
So... Oh, and the reason
Let
it's
people
called,
tell their own
the
stories.
reason it's called the Chicago 7, even though there was 8, and why it's called the Chicago 8, is because after this incident where he's bound and gagged, they do declare a mistrial. They separate his case from the rest. He's tried separately. So it becomes the 7. Just making clear that that's why that is. So, on the whole, I think that the movie is good. I think it's entertaining.
It's worth a watch.
It's worth a watch.
It
It's
gives
not
you context.
super historically accurate, but the broad strokes are true.
Yeah,
The
does
incident is true.
and the message is anti-war, and the message is pro left and counterculture.
Yeah.
I
mean, I've seen people say like, "Oh, it's about this," the Tom Hayden wants to be taken seriously, and Abby Hoffman's just like an anarchist, and like that is kind of the central philosophical argument, but it doesn't come down fully, I don't think, on either side, and it's worth noting that this is still an intra-left argument. These are still two people that are left activists.
I think if you watch it, you will find it relatable to all the different movements that are kind of, it does a really good job of showing all the different people that were showing up to these protests, and like just like today, how at a Black Lives Matter protest in Portland, you're gonna have hardcore Antifa people, you're gonna have moms against violence that are like just kind of hippies, and then you're gonna have DSA members or the Sunrise Movement, or you're gonna have your more Hillary Clinton Democrats and liberals, and like how a lot of them have very common goals, but absolutely different ways of approaching it. And so the movie does a good job of being like, is it wrong to like what's the right way to get our goal of anti-war or whatever, and just fighting over the messaging. But unlike Sorkin, unlike The Newsroom, which is pretty preachy, it does not take a anti-radical point of view. Like it instead is very like,
it's more
this
radical
is what we needed
than his actual politics.
Yeah, that's what I was shocked about, because every time Aaron Sorkin opens his mouth, in the recent years, he always says something that feels not great.
That sums it up well. With this is from an interview with Fareed Zakaria on CNN from early 2019 or late 2018, and he's talking about the recently elected squad.
Oh yeah, this quote.
The squad. He says, "I like Kamala Harris a lot. I like Joe Biden a lot. I really like the new crop of young people who were just elected to Congress. They now need to stop acting like young people, okay? I think that there's a great opportunity here, now more than ever, for Democrats to be the non-stupid party. That it's not just about transgender bathrooms. That's a Republican talking point they're trying to distract you with. That we haven't forgotten about the economic anxiety of the middle class, but we're going to be smart about this. We're not going to be mean about it." This is very Sorkin-esque.
It's very Sorkin-esque, because it's like, what are you like?
It's just bloviation, and it's policing tone and civility instead of fighting for specific policies. And of course, it's hilarious that he specifically says he likes Kamala and Joe, so I bet he's very happy these days.
Yeah.
But it's bizarre that he said all this and then went on to make this movie about being a young person in politics.
Yeah,
even
like
though Sacha Baron Cohen is like 50 years old, and I'm pretty sure Abby Hoffman was like 29 when that happened.
Yeah, but he's timeless.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was so weird, because I was like, this does not feel like it lines up with Sorkin's point of view, but it was very pro young people out in the street fighting against violence, and very anti police brutality. I feel like Sorkin might actually feel like, well, that was back then, but nowadays
that's kind of the baby boomer way to justify that.
Yeah.
Is like, well, that was back during the shit. And we had to be crazy.
Vietnam War was crazy, and now, they were doing this.
Now all these kids need to pipe down. Just get it.
Because things are solved now.
Everything's solved.
So that was really interesting to be like, wow, this is very on the side of all of the protests that have been going on this summer. Yeah. And yet, I feel like Sorkin's not happy with those.
Is. Yeah. The movie itself is on the side of that, but, the author is dead.
Sorkin himself, I was reading about West Wing trivia on IMDb, and apparently there was an episode about, veterans that won all these awards, and Sorkin, it was like co-written by Sorkin and another guy, whose dad was a veteran that like drank himself to death, but Sorkin accepted the award and spoke only him, and then the guy was upset about it, and he was like, hey, I've written every episode of The West Wing. I just have these people on my writing staff. I just let them, Anyway, so Sorkin took complete credit for this award-winning episode, and was like, it was just loosely based on that guy's story, and it was like, I completely rewrote it. So Sorkin's like, I've written every episode of The West Wing, and then people were really mad, and so then he took it back. So it's like, he obviously is a big egotist, and I feel like when his ego is in check a little, he has those moments of
he's talented,
clarity,
but he's egotistical.
Yeah, I feel like he's part of a long line of egotistical auteur people.
Cokeheads.
Cokeheads. Yeah, a lot of... Yeah, I was really surprised there were, like, no walk and talks in this.
Yeah, none at all. Well, because they're all sitting behind the bench.
Yeah. Sid and...
All right, let's wrap this one up.
Okay.
We're already on hour 20.
Okay.
So we're feeling good. Any final thoughts on Iran Sorkin?
No. There's a famous Thanksgiving episode, and we will mention it on our next episode, which is going to be about turkey pardoning.
That's right. Gobble, gobble. Spoiler alerts.
A turkey in every pod.
That's right. So stay tuned for our next episode on turkey pardoning.
So, do you have any final thoughts on Sorkin?
No, I think that Steve Jobs is really good. He co-wrote Moneyball, which I love.
He co-wrote Moneyball.
Check it out. If you watch The West Wing, just watch it for what it is. Don't try to get all your politics from it. And
that reminds me, a thing with The West Wing is that it was very loved by people in politics.
Yeah.
So like Obama did a whole like National Cheese Block Day. Hold on, our cat is destroying everything. Penny down.
She's so mad.
And Hillary wrote a letter to...
They did like a reunion for Biden, I think.
Yeah, and I think Hillary wrote a letter to Aaron Sorkin that was like referencing a bunch of stuff from The West Wing, and
honestly, it's worth watching just to understand the psyche of the ruling class of the Democratic Party. Like, it's deep in their brains.
Yeah, and there's a lot of very young Elizabeth Moss is in it.
Oh, yeah, great performances. Great cast.
I almost said Jude Law. What's his name?
Rob Lowe.
I don't know why. Lalo. There's a young Bradley Whitford, which he's kind of... I think he's supposed to be the Sorkin.
Yeah, for sure.
Because he's like kind of ugly, but everyone's fucking him.
He's the most resistance-brained person on Twitter right now.
Yeah, so Bradley Whitford, you might remember him from the film Get Out, where he plays...
Or The Handmaid's Tale.
He basically... So he plays in Get Out the dad who famously says...
He says, I would have voted for Obama a third time if I could.
Like, he says that to be like, I love black people.
Yeah, because his character in Get Out is the peak resistance-brained liberal villain, basically.
Yeah.
That guy loves West Wing, I'm sure.
Yeah, and the movie has a lot of really good themes about, like, hey, you can walk the walk, or you can talk the talk, but that doesn't mean you don't have weird prejudice. It doesn't mean you don't make black people uncomfortable.
It says everything about Bradley Whitford that he didn't know that line was a joke.
Yeah, he didn't know it was a joke. And then he also is in The Handmaid's Tale as the guy who invented basically all of
Gilead's economy.
All of Gilead, but he kind of feels bad for it, and sometimes he helps out Elizabeth Moss, but also sometimes he's a dick. So Bradley Whitford is always tweeting something political, and he tweeted the other day a meme of Parasite, where I think it was Biden and Kamala were
the rich
family just trying to sit on their couch and enjoy, and Trump
and the poor couple hiding underneath the coffee table was
Trump
Donald and Ivanka.
Yeah.
Or Melania. And it's like, what do you think Parasite is about?
Yeah, like...
Who do you think is the bad guy in Parasite?
Any interpretation of this meme is wrong. If the interpretation of the meme is that Trump and Melania are the good people...
My only idea...
It's like, what is this...
Is that it's trying to imply that Trump and Melania are going to hide behind in the White House when
and aren't getting out... Yeah.
Like the other couple in Parasite, not the one that hides underneath the coffee table. But even that is wrong.
Yeah.
I cannot fathom. I want a whole podcast.
Oh my god. Penny just ran across the entire laptop.
I want a whole podcast.
Crazy girl.
That's rich people explaining what they think Parasite is about.
Yeah.
That's all I want.
A lot of people point out how Chrissy Teigen loved Parasite, and point out tweets of hers where she's like, oh, I made my maid do this, or oh, I'm not going to clean up the poop on the floor, I'll just let the maid do it. And I will say Chrissy Teigen is richer than shit, but I will say that she is a lot more like a comedy writer than
She seems
people
pretty
think.
self-aware.
Yeah, like I do think that she, when she says stuff like that, she is joking.
Yeah,
and I do think that she got Parasite. A lot of people read her tweets very literally. And
There's not a lot of good faith. I definitely agree. I don't have any emotional room in my life to be angry at Chrissy Teigen about anything.
I embrace
I don't care.
her
I think that her stuff is
recipes
funny.
and her. I think she's self-aware.
I think so too.
But someone like Bradley Whitford is not.
not.
I mean, and also I remember he was married to
The mom?
Lois from the mom, married to the
Oh,
mom.
that's right, Jane Kasmerick.
Married to Jane Kasmerick, the mom from Malcolm in the Middle, and they both got those parts. She got Malcolm in the Middle at the same time that he got The West Wing.
She's very sweet.
And so they were like, it was perfect. Like, we were married, we both had full-time jobs, and our kids were good. And then I think they both got divorced after that. But
I'm glad they both got divorced and not just one of them.
yeah.
Okay, so that's Aaron Sorkin.
Wait, one more tidbit from IMDb.
Okay.
That when they were filming at some point near the White House, I guess, a woman came out like all mad that they were being loud or something. It was like, I gotta wake up early, I've got a government thing. And then she's like, hey, and your show doesn't even have a Secretary of State. You should have one, and it should be a woman. And it was Madeleine Albright saying that to them. So yeah, everyone was keeping up. Like when Hillary wrote her letter to Aaron Sorkin, it was very like fanfic, like very like, I think that Josh should have done this in season 2 at the missile crisis or whatever.
Madeleine Albright, for our younger listeners at home, the first female Secretary of State was Bill Clinton's Secretary of State.
Yas Queen.
Yas Queen. Better than Kissinger as far as German-born Secretaries of State go.
Kissinger, watch. Is he alive?
Somehow, yes.
So yeah, have some fun, watch some shows, get your mind off of things, but also
read about the people covered in Trial of Chicago 7.
Be woke.
Get some inspiration from them. They're all very cool. All the people you mentioned, but also Bill Kunstler, who is their lawyer, a great radical leftist attorney, and former U.S. Attorney General Ramsey Clark, LBJ's Attorney General, who really walked the walk with the rest of his career. So check him out too. Played by Michael Keaton in the film.
Yes, strong recommend of Michael Keaton. And yeah, I almost was like, and stay sexy, and don't get. I'm like, wait, that's not. I'm just like, that's how we just end podcasts end, right? Yeah. Until next time, we are chicken in every pod.
Take her easy.
Take her easy. That sounds gross.
Does it? I think it's gross if you make it gross.
If you say take her hard.
Ew.
No, that's not. I'm sorry. Okay. We are chicken in every pod.
And we think you're great.
That's all I needed to hear.
Bye.
Bye.